My name is Eleanor Bates, and I never imagined I would live to see the day I'd bury my only child. At 69 years old, I thought I knew grief, having lost my husband a decade ago. But nothing prepared me for the heartbreak of standing beside my son Michael's casket, feeling the last remnants of my world crumble. Michael was my everything. After my husband died suddenly of a heart attack, it was Michael and his wife Rachel who convinced me to sell my house and move in with them. "We're family, Mom," Michael had said, his arm draped lovingly around Rachel. "It'll be good for all of us." I trusted them completely. I gave them not only my heart, but also the proceeds from my house sale, over $300,000, which helped them buy the beautiful home we shared, or so I thought we shared. The day of Michael's funeral was a blur of condolences, tears, and unbearable sorrow. Rachel looked every bit the grieving widow, dressed in flawless black, dabbing her tears with a monogrammed handkerchief. I sat beside her, devastated but grateful we had each other to lean on. At least, that's what I believed. Until I overheard her. I had stepped away to take my arthritis medication when I caught her voice in the hallway, lighter, almost giddy. "It's finally over," Rachel sighed to her friend. "Now I can get my life back and finally ship that old hag off to a nursing home where she belongs." My blood ran cold, my knees buckled. I pressed myself against the wall, heart pounding, struggling to comprehend the words. That old hag. She was talking about me, the woman she had called Mom for nearly 20 years. In that moment, my grief twisted into something else. Betrayal. I realized my heartbreak wasn't over. It was only just beginning. It's strange how easily we miss the cracks when we're too busy holding on to love. Looking back now, I see so many signs, but at the time, I was just grateful to be the part of my son's life. After my husband Thomas passed away, the loneliness was crushing. Our family home, where Michael had grown up, felt unbearably empty. Rachel and Michael had seemed like a godsend. They showed up immediately after the funeral with casseroles, hugs, and promises that we'd always have each other. "Mom, it makes no sense for you to stay in that big old house alone," Michael had said, his eyes full of concern. "Sell it and move in with us. We'll take care of everything." Rachel had smiled sweetly and added, "We can invest the money to secure your future. You'll never have to worry." It sounded perfect. I didn't hesitate. I sold the home Thomas and I had built over 40 years and handed over everything, every cent, to Michael and Rachel. We bought a gorgeous 2-story house in a quiet neighborhood. It even had a guest suite, which Rachel insisted would be mine. In the beginning, things were wonderful. I cooked dinner most nights, helped with Daniel and Emily, and spent evenings laughing with Michael over old family stories. Rachel worked a lot, but I thought nothing of it. She always seemed busy with real estate clients, and I admired her ambition. Daniel and Emily, oh, those sweet children, were my heart. Daniel was 11 when I moved in, thoughtful and protective of his little sister. Emily, only 8, had her father's curious eyes and her mother's dazzling smile. We quickly became inseparable. I'd bake cookies with them after school, help with homework, and sneak them extra bedtime stories when their parents were out. To the outside world, we looked like the picture-perfect family. 3 generations under one roof, united and happy. But now, remembering little moments, I see the truth hiding beneath the surface. Rachel's smiles, I realize, were often tight. Her compliments seemed rehearsed. There were subtle hints, how she'd sigh when I needed help with my phone, or how she'd roll her eyes when I was slow getting into the car because of my arthritis. Small things I brushed off at the time. I told myself she was just stressed, juggling work and family. Michael, my sweet boy, was the glue. He made sure we had Sunday dinners together, checked in on me often, and always made me feel welcome. If there were tensions I didn't see, he smoothed them over. His love made it all seem safe. And so, I ignored the warning signs, choosing instead to believe we were a true family. That illusion shattered completely the day of the funeral, when Rachel's cruel words cut through my grief like a knife. As I sat back down after hearing her betrayal, my mind raced through every memory, every choice that had brought me to this moment. how blind I had been, how utterly alone I now felt. But one thing was certain: I wasn't going to let Rachel see me break. Not yet. That night, after everyone had gone home, I sat alone in my small guest room, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The house was so quiet, but my mind was loud, filled with Rachel's words, looping over and over like a cruel taunt. I replayed every memory, trying to understand how I had been so blind. I thought about the day Michael was diagnosed. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. It had hit us out of nowhere. Rachel had been calm, almost too calm, taking charge of everything: doctor's appointments, hospice care, finances. She told me not to worry, that Michael was in good hands. At first, I admired her strength, but now, piecing everything together, I saw things I hadn't before. In those last months, Rachel seemed distant, distracted. She started dressing up more. New clothes, fresh haircuts, even makeup for simple errands. She said it helped her feel normal, and I never questioned it. And then there were the trips. Always some urgent business she had to attend to, often leaving Michael in my care while she went away for the weekend. I'd told myself she was working hard to keep the family afloat, but now I wasn't so sure. I remembered one moment, about 2 weeks before Michael passed. Rachel had asked me to fetch her phone charger, and as I grabbed it from her purse, a message flashed across the screen. "Eric, can't wait to see you again. Last night was incredible." My stomach had twisted, but I had shaken it off. I didn't want to believe anything bad about Rachel. Michael was dying. I couldn't deal with anything else. But now, with the truth slapping me in the face, I realized I should have trusted my gut. The next morning, I forced myself to get up, make coffee, and sit with Daniel and Emily before school. They were quiet, clinging to me more than usual. "Grandma, are you okay?" Daniel asked softly. His big brown eyes filled with worry. I hugged them tightly, holding back tears. "I'm fine, sweetheart. We're going to be okay." Rachel breezed in, perfectly put together as always. "Come on, kids, time to go," she said with a bright smile that didn't reach her eyes. She glanced at me briefly, her gaze cool and unreadable. We didn't speak. Later that day, Rachel reminded me that the reading of Michael's will was scheduled for the next morning. Her tone was clipped, businesslike, and I could tell she was eager to tie up loose ends. But I had a strange sense of calm, because in one of his final lucid moments, Michael had whispered something to me. "Mom, I made sure you're taken care of. Rachel won't be able to touch you." At the time, I didn't fully understand, but now I clung to those words like a lifeline. The next morning, we arrived at the lawyer's office, an old brick building downtown. Rachel strode in first, head held high, dressed in a sharp black suit that looked more suited for a business deal than a will reading. Daniel and Emily followed, clutching my hands tightly. I felt my heart pounding as we took our seats around a large, polished table. Grace Collins, Michael's attorney for years, greeted us warmly, but with the professional seriousness the moment demanded. "Thank you for coming. I know this is a difficult time," she began, shuffling through a stack of documents. "Michael made some specific provisions in his will, and it's my duty to honor his wishes exactly." Rachel sat back in her chair, her legs crossed elegantly, eyes glittering with quiet triumph. I could almost hear her thinking, "Let's get this over with so I can move on." Grace looked directly at me before continuing. "First, regarding the family home at 221 Maple Drive and the lake cabin at Blue Ridge, both properties are placed in an irrevocable family trust, with Eleanor Bates named as trustee. Eleanor retains the right to live in either property for the remainder of her life. Upon her passing, both properties will pass in equal shares to Daniel and Emily Bates." I heard Rachel's breath hitch. She sat up straighter, her face pale. "That's not possible," she said sharply. "The house is in my name." Grace remained calm, unfazed. "Michael transferred his interest in both properties to the trust 2 years ago. You signed the documents yourself, Mrs. Bates. The cabin was never in your name. It was purchased directly into the trust." Rachel's eyes darted wildly, searching for an argument, but there was nothing to say. Grace continued smoothly. "As for Michael's financial assets, totaling approximately $900,000. 60% is allocated to a trust for Daniel and Emily's education and care, with Eleanor Bates as trustee. 20% is granted directly to Eleanor. The remaining 20% is granted to Rachel Bates. Rachel's jaw clenched, her hands gripping the armrests. "This is a joke," she spat. "I was his wife. I deserve more than crumbs." Grace's eyes sharpened just slightly. "Michael was of sound mind when he made these provisions. I have his doctor's certification on record." Rachel stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly across the floor. "We'll see about that," she hissed. "This will can be contested." I sat silently, gripping my cane, my heart thudding in my chest. I looked at Daniel and Emily, my reason for standing strong. Rachel could fight all she wanted. Michael had set things in motion to protect us. I only hoped it would be enough. True to her word, Rachel wasted no time filing a lawsuit to contest Michael's will. Within days, I was served with legal papers, accusing me of manipulating Michael during his illness and claiming he was not of sound mind when he made his final decisions. The accusations cut deep. How dare she? After everything I'd done for their family, for her. But fear also crept in. I didn't have the money or strength to battle Rachel and her high-powered attorney, a man named Martin Greer, who was infamous for dragging cases out and wearing people down. I felt utterly lost until my oldest friend, Carol, stepped in. "You need someone tough, Ellie," she told me, gripping my hands tightly. "I know just the person. Grace Collins is excellent, but for court battles, you'll want my friend, Grace's partner, someone who won't back down." And that's how I met Grace's colleague, Grace Collins, a sharp, no-nonsense attorney who had a reputation for defending the elderly and vulnerable. From the first meeting, Grace's calm confidence made me breathe easier. "This is elder abuse, plain and simple," she said after hearing my story, "and we're going to fight it head-on." She got to work immediately, digging into financial records and old communications. One evening, as I was helping Emily with her homework, Grace called, her voice tight with excitement. "Eleanor, I need you to check Michael's office. Look in any drawers, files, anything that seems out of place. I have a hunch he left something behind." That night, when Rachel was out, another mysterious business dinner, I gathered my courage and entered Michael's study. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but my hands trembled as I pulled open drawer after drawer. In the bottom file cabinet, tucked behind a stack of old tax documents, I found it, a sealed envelope with my name scrawled across the front. Inside was a USB drive and a short handwritten note. "Mom, if you're reading this, it means Rachel has done exactly what I feared. This drive contains everything you'll need. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I wanted to protect you. I love you, Michael." With shaking fingers, I plugged the USB into my laptop. What I found stunned me. Meticulously organized folders of emails, financial transactions, and audio recordings. Recordings of Rachel, laughing cruelly, talking about how she planned to send me to a nursing home and liquidate the family's assets. Emails to a man named Eric Whitman, her lover, discussing their plans for life after Michael. Tears blurred my vision, but beneath the heartbreak was a burning sense of purpose. Michael had been watching, had seen Rachel's true colors, and had done everything he could to shield us, even while he was dying. The next morning, I marched into Grace's office and handed her the drive. She plugged it in, brows furrowing as she scrolled through the files. "This changes everything," she said quietly. "We have her now." The courtroom was smaller than I expected, but it felt like the weight of the world hung in that space. I sat beside Grace, clutching my cane, while Rachel sat across the aisle, dressed in an elegant navy dress, her expression ice-cold. Martin Greer strutted around confidently, filing motions and objecting at every turn. But Grace was steady and unflappable. The highlight came when Grace called Eric Whitman to the stand. Rachel's head whipped around in shock as Eric entered, looking uncomfortable but determined. Under oath, he confirmed everything: their affair, their secret plans, and Rachel's repeated insistence that once Michael was gone, I would be out of the picture. Rachel's face turned ghostly pale. "You liar!" she hissed across the courtroom, but the damage was done. Grace then submitted the recordings and emails as evidence, and the judge, an older woman named Judge Franklin, listened intently, her eyes narrowing with each cruel word Rachel had spoken. When it was my turn to testify, I took a deep breath, looked at the judge, and spoke from the heart. I told her about my love for Michael, my trust in Rachel, and the betrayal that had shattered my world. I kept my voice steady, for Michael, for Daniel, and Emily. By the end of the day, the courtroom was silent, the air thick with tension. Judge Franklin announced she would review the evidence and issue a ruling within the week. I left the courthouse exhausted, but filled with something I hadn't felt in weeks: hope. The week that followed was the longest of my life. Every day felt like walking a tightrope, waiting for the judge's decision, while trying to keep things as normal as possible for Daniel and Emily. They were old enough to sense the tension, though I did my best to shield them from the worst of it. Rachel, meanwhile, became a ghost in her own home. She slammed doors, barely spoke to the kids, and avoided me completely. The once polished veneer she'd worn so well had cracked wide open, revealing someone I barely recognized, a woman consumed by anger and bitterness. Then, on a bright Monday morning, the call came. Grace's voice was steady but full of quiet triumph. "It's over, Eleanor. Judge Franklin ruled in our favor, completely. The will stands as Michael intended." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Tears welled up, but this time they weren't just from sadness. Relief, vindication, and an overwhelming sense of gratitude washed over me. "Thank you, Grace," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Thank you for helping us hold on to Michael's legacy." That afternoon, Rachel packed her things. There was no dramatic farewell, no parting words. She left in silence, her footsteps echoing through the now quiet house. Daniel and Emily clung to me, tears streaming down their faces. Even after all that had happened, watching their mother walk out of their lives was a wound I couldn't heal. But I promised them we'd make it through, together. 2 years have passed since that day, and life has taken on a new rhythm. Daniel and Emily chose to stay with me, and we've built a home full of love and resilience. There are still moments of sadness, moments when I catch Daniel staring quietly at an old photo of his parents, or see Emily tracing her father's handwriting in one of his books. But there's also laughter now, real laughter that fills the house again. We redecorated the home, making it ours in every sense. Gone are Rachel's cold, modern touches. In their place are warm, cozy spaces filled with family photos, Daniel's sports trophies, and Emily's ever-growing collection of art supplies. Holidays are spent together, often at the lake cabin Michael loved so much. We've created new traditions: bonfires by the water, movie nights under blankets, and long talks on the porch swing as the sun sets. Each memory feels like a tribute to Michael, a way of honoring the love he poured into us. I've also reclaimed parts of myself I'd long forgotten. I joined a book club at the local library, started watercolor painting, and even made a few new friends. And while my days are still centered around my grandchildren, I've found a quiet joy in rediscovering who I am beyond just a mother and grandmother. Every once in a while, Rachel calls the children, on birthdays or holidays. The conversations are brief and strained, but Daniel and Emily have grown stronger, wiser. They know now what love and loyalty truly mean. One evening, as we sat by the fire at the lake house, Daniel looked up at me and said, "Grandma, I think Dad would be really proud of us." I hugged him close, my heart swelling with both sorrow and pride. Yes, sweetheart, he absolutely would. And I believe that, with all my heart. Because in the end, Michael's final gift wasn't just the legal protection he left behind. It was the unwavering reminder that love, real love, isn't just about words or appearances. It's about actions, about showing up, standing strong, and protecting the people who matter most. Rachel once said she'd finally get rid of me. But here I am, still standing, still loving, still living. And in the quiet moments, when the house is peaceful and the children are safe and happy, I know this is the sweetest victory of all.